Hi.
Hi.
Nice to finally see your face. How are you doing?
Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. We don't have the cold snap that you guys are going through, but we had a lot of rain. So I'm not originally from California, so I kind of think it's hilarious. The water falls from the sky and people freak the fuck out. They don't know how to handle it. They're just like, I didn't move here for this. There's no
It could
drainage.
be worse. It's like 35 degrees here today. So,
Yeah, I shouldn't tell you it's going to be like 78 here.
oh, I don't like you anymore. This interview is over.
Even my parents were like telling me a couple weeks ago, they're like, don't post any pictures of you like on a sun-drenched pier with palm trees, like holding that tree, because we'll just disown you.
Yeah. Well, I would too if I were that.
Don't be that son. I'm like, all right. So welcome to Make Your Own Fun. I'm here with Brett Elizabeth Jenkins, and you're looking really sprightly today. I see you've had your coffee.
I'm drinking it right now.
Oh, what's the cup say?
It says chaotic awkward.
Oh yeah, and you've probably seen this one.
No, I haven't seen it.
It's for Fox's sake, and I've run that course a little bit too much because people are like, "Oh, sake." I'm like, "No, it's," and they're like, "We know what it says." I'm like, "Damn it." Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and I guess we were just talking a little while ago that you've had another big move this year, and was that from Minneapolis?
Yeah, I've had kind of a wild year. So I moved from Minneapolis down to Indiana in August. I moved to Bluffton and I moved in with a girl that I knew from college. And I lived there for about 5 months and then I just moved again last Sunday. So I've been in this apartment for a week and I love it. My cat loves it. There's lots of windows for her to look out.
What's your cat's name?
Her name is Nora.
Nice.
Yeah. So we're settling in. I still have like things are arriving in boxes. So there's like a lot of recycling. They won't pick it up until next week. So my apartment is just like a castle of cardboard boxes right now, which is fine.
It's like too bad that didn't happen like before Christmas. Then you just have all these boxes to use for presents if you needed to.
I know. Yeah.
Timing, right? So yeah, I guess you've got some books together. Things are really happening. I checked out your blog and you're updating that again, which is cool. So people can kind of find you on there and see what you've been working on, and a lot of stuff published recently. So even though it's been chaotic, I think I read somewhere, I think it was the blog, that 65 poems is this 2001, 2021, I mean.
I did write 65 poems last year, which is mostly thanks to two different writing groups that I'm in. One that I found once I moved to Indiana. I'm in an in-person writing group here with 3 other women. And we meet on Thursdays, and at the end of each writing group, we write a poem together. And we do like a weird whole thing for that. But then during most of last year,
making it sound like sacrifices, but it's a Tuesday, so it's normal.
Yeah, we just need a goat and an infant. So
I
we
mean,
can usually find those in a pinch.
It's Indiana. People are bored during the week.
So we do that. But last year I was also in an online workshop with a poet named Desiree Della Giacomo. She is published with Button Poetry. And so she ran an online workshop every Friday morning and Friday evening, but I was in the morning workshop, and every Friday morning, I would also write a poem with this online workshop. So if not for that, I probably wouldn't have written at all in 2021, because 2021 was just a shit show of a year.
I think it was for a lot of people. I mean, I remember going into 2021 thinking like can't be possibly as bad as 2020, which is like the year that basically didn't happen. And then 2021 was like, come on, but it was pretty bad. But Tell me, locally in that area, are there open mics or readings at bookstores or coffee shops that you can go to?
I don't know that yet. I'm still trying to figure that out. I've only lived in Fort Wayne for a week, though I did work here. I've worked here since August, but these are the things that I'm going to try to find out. And if they don't exist, then maybe I will make them exist.
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, take me back in your Wayback Machine, and I guess let me know when you were a kid if there was like a specific um, singer or songwriter with their lyrics, or someone maybe gifted you a book, or you saw someone reading somewhere, or you heard like a spoken word album or something where you thought, yeah, I want to do that. Like that's a really interesting.
So I still have the first book of poetry that I was ever gifted. It's right behind me, so I'm going to grab it.
Okay.
My Uncle Ron and Aunt Barb gave this to me when it was 92, so I would have been 5 or 6. It's just the classic
Oh, cool.
treasury of children's poetry. And there's some wild shit in here, like stuff by Christina Rossetti and like Longfellow, like Isaac Watts. And then there's like a bunch of anonymous.
Yeah, it's
books.
like you look back at some of that stuff that you read that, parents thought it was so like innocent, and you look at it now and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like a lot of
So that was
like
the
the
first book
grim
of poetry.
fairy tales, you're like, wait a minute, this is like if you look at the real actual grim fairy tales that came out, not like the watered down kids version, you're
There's
like,
so
this
much
is some
death, like
disturbing
everybody
shit.
dies.
These Germans are fucked. What the hell? Does everybody have to die? Or you wouldn't learn anything, kids. Oh, okay. All right. So from there, what do you remember first writing, or maybe journaling or something? Or was that more something that developed through like middle school?
Oh yeah, I journaled my whole life basically. I kept most of them. Um, Hang on, I have to show you this one. I called it my captain's log. It has a little cat on the front. I'm pretty sure this one is from like, I don't know, I'm writing in cursive, so I don't know when that would have been. Maybe 6th grade, but I always journaled. My first diary was one with a lock and a key, and then I lost the key, so I had to throw the diary away. But I remember the first poem I wrote was called Fat Turkey, and it was about murdering a turkey on Thanksgiving, and then the turkey comes back to life in your stomach to take revenge on you.
That's like some real Tim Burton stuff.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. So everybody had this experience. I probably want to say like middle school through high school, where you've got to do the horrible oral book report in front of the class with the loose leaf paper in your hand and you're nervous as hell. So was there a transition from that to that age or a little bit older, let's say, when you were nervous, shy, sharing in front of people, to you did start going to some readings and open mics? Or was it maybe that age or a little bit older?
I've never been shy. I feel like maybe that's some kind of mental health issue, but I'm like not, I'm not shy. I've never been shy. Like I used to speak in front of people as a child in like NAS. They would be like, who wants to read the petitions this week? And I would be like, me. And all the other kids are like, no, I don't want to speak in front of people.
What's wrong with her? Yeah.
So but I didn't start going to readings or anything until like college and grad school, really. Like I didn't consider myself a writer until I started studying writing in college and grad school.
Yeah, I never really considered myself a writer until like I had to produce or I had to do stuff. Like I was in a comedy group when I was in college, and it's like we would do like a monthly like stage show. So it's like well, we had to get together and write stuff or there was no show. So it's like you have to do that. And then for writing poetry and things like that, I remember going to like my first few open mics and readings and going and then getting up in front of people and people being like so aloof and uninterested, and I'm going like, is it me? And I just thought like, oh, I really got to up my game. I've got to write like shorter, punchier pieces to get people's attention and hold it. So that was kind of like my first experience with that. So did you have some interesting experiences? I'm sure like getting up in front of people where it's like you learn to not, hold the page in front of your face at the microphone and all that,
Yeah.
like learn as you go stuff.
When I was in grad school, one of the teachers there did a whole lecture on like delivering your own work and how to do it and like what not to do and how not to do the poet voice. And
Oh, the
like,
cadence, yeah.
yeah. And so that was the whole thing. But I feel like a lot of my poems are funny. And so I feel like if I'm not getting a reaction out of the audience, then I'm doing it wrong.
Or
Like I
you
can
get the
usually,
reaction you don't want,
what?
or you get a reaction that you don't necessarily want.
Yeah. Or
Like you've been
sometimes
in a
like,
place and there's just like dead silence, and then a guy in like the 10th row is just going, and that's like the only sound, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna get these off the podium, and
that has
all
happened.
right, that's my
Another
time.
thing that has happened is like I will transition from reading a funny poem into a poem that's more serious, and people are expecting it to be funny. And so I'll say something like devastatingly sad, and somebody will laugh, and I'm like, it's not funny. It's not supposed to
Yeah,
be.
they're like, I was with you when you were talking about goblin farts, but then the whole thing with like abortions and getting punched in the face, like I didn't know that was like a bridge piece to the other thing that you talked about, like setting a Christmas tree on fire, which was much funnier.
Yeah.
And you're like,
So
or I was just talking to the guy that I interviewed the other day, Scott, about this, which is um if you're like new to like a reading or like a certain like venue or whatever, if you haven't been there been a while, and you find somebody and you're like attracted to them, and you go back a couple weeks later and you've got like that crush or unrequited love poem, and then you read it and then you talk to them later and that's the one they like the least, and you're like, oh, that's interesting that you thought that was shallow and pedantic. Okay, moving on. I'm sure you've had experiences like that too, where you just read things and it just doesn't go the way you think it's going to go. Or the ones that you think are going to go over really well, like gangbusters, don't. And then the ones you're like, well, I need my fifth poem to fill out my like 7 or 8 minutes. I'll pad it with this one. And then that's the one they connect
that
with.
people love. Yeah. I had a guy, I did a poetry tour. I like did a GoFundMe in 2010 or 2011 for a Midwest poetry tour. And so I was reading poems all over the Midwest. And I did one in Indianapolis. And this guy like wrote a whole blog about how my poetry was bad. And I was like, I still remember his name and I will never forgive him, even though I reposted a link to that on my own blog. And I was like, here's a guy that doesn't like me. Because I thought it was kind
I
of
don't
funny.
understand the guys thing, because it's kind of like whoever he is, it's like that's so much effort to write something that you don't like. It's so much better to just write a sentence or two about, whatever, and then move on, rather than just be like, grr.
Right. Also, I was like 24 at the time and he was in his 60s. I'm like,
Oh, well, he just didn't get
get
it.
a life. Like,
He
find
didn't know
something to
what you
do.
were going through, That's why, like, again, talking about the Scott, the guy I just talked to a few days ago, we both kind of agreed that it's like you just have to write about your life, your experience, what you're going through. I mean, you can project and do fun like people watching poems or whatever, but yeah, people that are like 30, 40 years older than you, they're basically on another planet at this point. They're like, are you sure we landed on the moon? Are you sure? Where's the proof? So
I was like, when I'm in my 60s, I hope I just let 20-year-old poets do their thing and don't gripe
you're not
about
going to be
it.
like that lady that's like, damn kids.
Get off my lawn.
Yeah, you're not going to be like, yelling at the Scooby-Doo gang or whatever. So what was kind of like your first brush with or actually let me go back and ask you, was there anybody in your life, like a friend or a teacher or someone that really kind of said like, you've got something here, let's pursue this, like you should try to do more of this or share it with people?
Yeah, it was my creative writing professor in college. His name was Del Dowdy. He was a creative writing professor at Huntington College, well, Huntington University. It was Huntington College when I started, and then a year after they got their university accreditation. So anyway, his name was Del Dowdy. I took his creative writing class, and he was like, these are good. And I was like, okay. And he also encouraged me to apply to grad school, which is how I got into Bennington. Yeah, it was him. And
Awesome.
he like did a bunch of independent studies with me for like writing, and he really stoked that fire, I guess.
Was he or someone after that kind of the one that kind of pushed you into, or not push, maybe that's not the right word, but kind of nudged you into saying something like, there are some journals out there that might pay you a little money, or they're putting together an anthology, something like that, that, you should submit to this?
That was a different person, actually. That was my friend Joe Urschel, who's also an English teacher, but he teaches high school English in Columbia City, Indiana. And I was his roommate for a year. And he was like, oh, you should submit poetry. Here are some like cool magazines that I read. And one of them was called Denver Syntax. And that was the first magazine that ever published one of my poems. And I think I was like 20 years old. So
That's a great feeling though, isn't it? Like the first time, like I'm sure you got rejections and things before that, and it's just like, oh, they hate me. But then when you get that first thing in somewhere and you get that response, the email response where you're like expecting the rejection, and then all of a sudden you're like, what? No way.
I know that's probably one of the best feelings in the world, is getting a poetry acceptance. But that first one, I was like on cloud 9 for like a whole week.
Oh, there's nothing that really compares to it. Where I mean, I still get that thrill too, and I've been doing this for a while, which is just, I don't know. It's cheesy, but it's kind of like they like me. Like I feel like I'm so out of the box and eccentric and stuff. So whenever I get anything published, I don't feel like it's the normal whatever they're looking for. Because sometimes I'm just in a rush and I'm not thinking about like what the actual submission is calling for. Because sometimes they
Right.
have an exact quoted theme of the issue, and then I fire off my 5 poems, and then then I go back a day later and look at the email and I'm like, oh, this is not what they were looking for at all. But then they take one and you're like, okay.
Yeah. Oops, they're looking for only poems about clowns.
And you're like, yeah. Okay, so moving on from there, let's say, did you have like a local poetry reading or open mic that you went to around that time in college?
Not really. Like, I went to college in a super small town, and I didn't really know any other poets there. So it was mainly just me. But when I graduated from college, I started grad school immediately. So I graduated from Huntington in like May of 2008, and I started at Bennington in July of 2008. So after that, I like went to readings for school, and I was like meeting all these other poets, and it was phenomenal. I was like, these are my people. which was nice because there weren't any of those people where I lived.
Awesome, awesome. So, when did you put together your kind of first chapbook, or was it like right away getting published by a publisher?
So I put together a chapbook in 2000 and maybe 11, and it was published by a small publisher called NAP.
Or
Yes,
KNAPP.
NAP. It's run by a guy named Chad Redden, and they used to have an online magazine called NAP, and then they had NAP Chaps. So I submitted my chapbook to them. It was called Ether Ore, and he accepted it like 2 days later. And I was like, is this real? Like,
You're like, am I getting punked? Who are these people?
right? So that came
Like,
out.
did they even read it, or they were just like, let's just take it?
Well, I knew Chad because he had published some of my poems on NAP, and also he published an e-chap from me and another writer that was called Love Stories, Hate Stories. And like, so on one page it would be like a 3 or 4 line love poem, and then on the opposite page it would be a 3 or 4 line hate poem. And I wrote all the hate poems for that book.
You're like, oh, do I have some of these?
Mm-hmm. And that was a really weird book, so that was fun to write.
So speaking of the love and hate, and I know we talked about this a little while ago, that I think we both kind of have some interesting, bizarre dating stories from the last couple of years. I can start, or you can start. I think these are always hilarious because I'm not going to say any names or whatever, but
Oh, I would say names, but I won't for the sake of legality.
we want you to sell books, not have people burn them. Well, hey, I guess if they buy it, then they burn it. No, it's fine. Let's see. I want to say about 3 years ago, I went out on a date with this girl when I was living in Laguna Niguel. Totally different social atmosphere, like really affluent area. I mean, I basically was just renting a room out of a house. So it was like crazy expensive to live there, but I just wanted my daughter to be in like a great school district. But anyway, met this girl online, and then we met at a bar, and like she had gotten there like an hour before me. So I told her like, I'll meet you there on like Friday after work, and I got off at 5, so I'll meet you there at like 6. But I guess she just got there, and I guess she had gotten there and just been like pounding drinks
Oh my God.
to the point where I walked in, and then the person at the door, was like, oh, you can sit anywhere. Like, oh, I'm actually meeting somebody. And then I heard her like cackling at something on the TV screen, and I was like, oh no. And then I went over there and I sat down, and she was just like, you're not nearly drunk enough yet. I'm like, just got here. Can we maybe eat something? Like, I'll order something to drink while we eat. And she's just like, food's for losers. And I'm like, yeah, well, this loser is really fucking hungry because he's been working all day, and I need to eat something so I don't decorate the floor with whatever I'm going to drink later. And so, I don't know, we started having a conversation, and then about 20-30 minutes in, she started making these weird rationalizations and accusations, and I was like, I don't have a past with this person. Like, who does she think I am? And then a little bit further, she started calling me Jared. And I was like, I'm Eric. And she's like, such a Jared thing to say, you douche. And I was like, okay, well, I think I'm gonna go now. And she's like, fine. Well, I've got plans anyway. And I'm like, what? Like now or later? And then she went like this. And then some guy came from the other side of the bar. So I don't know if she like was chatting him up before I got there. And
That's so weird.
And then she's like, you got this, right? And I'm like, okay. She's like, peace out, Jared. I'm like, okay. And then
Did you pay for all of her drinks?
no,
Okay.
so the guy came over and I was like, what? And they just left together. And then
You like just summoned him?
yeah, like fucking Zsa Zsa Gabor or something. And then the waiter came over and he was like, yeah, man, it's all right, don't worry about it. Like she's got like a tab here. Like she's here like every weekend or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. I'm like, who's Jared? And she's like, oh, that's like her ex-boyfriend from 3 years ago. She was just like three sheets to the wind. I'm like, all right, man, like I'm just gonna give you like $5 for my drink. He's like, appreciate it, because she didn't tip.
Oh
So
my God.
that was like a whole thing that was like wrapped up in a bow within like an hour. It's horrible.
Well, at least you didn't waste a whole lot of time on her.
My God, it's just one of those things where it's such a great story where it's like people are
I
cartoons.
can't believe that happened.
Yeah, and the guy at the bar was like some beefcake, which was like muppeted his way over there. I was just like, the fuck. But like you said, sometimes you just dodge a bullet.
Yeah. So I think one of my weirdest stories, I had met this guy on Tinder or something. This is when I lived in Minneapolis, and we had been chatting for like a couple of weeks. And we would like make a plan, it would fall through, make a plan, it would fall through. But he seemed like normal. And he texted me one day and he was like, hey, I'm in your neighborhood. Do you want to grab a drink? And I was like, listen, like I just started making dinner. If you want, you can come over and we can have dinner together. I'm assuming at this point that he's a normal person. Otherwise, I would not have invited him to my apartment.
Right.
So he comes over. We have like this amazing dinner. Conversation is pretty good, though. Looking back, some red flags that I should have noticed and didn't. Like he's talking about how he buys things from people and resells them for more money than they're worth, and some of the items might be stolen. And I was just like, oh, but you have a normal job and you look normal, so maybe that's, I don't know. Anyway, we like split a bottle of wine. I'm cleaning up the dishes and he was like, you want some dessert? And I'm thinking he's gonna be like, let's go get some gelato. And I was like, yeah. And he reaches into his pocket and he was like, you want some meth? I was like, no, I don't want meth.
Oh, you're
So
like,
like,
oh, like
so
anyway, you met my friend the front door.
He like puts it back in his pocket. I'm like noticeably uncomfortable. He basically chugs the rest of his glass of wine. He's like, well, I better be going. And I was like, yeah.
Oh my God. Ah, people are crazy.
I know. I went on a date last night where we met at a bar like 5 minutes from my apartment. It wasn't a bad date, but I only bring it up because when we went inside, it was raining. When we came outside, it was like sleeting or like freezing rain. And we're both walking to our cars. And I was like, you better come back to like, he lived an hour away. And I was like, it's supposed to warm up to like almost 40 degrees in the next like hour or 2 hours. You can come over, we can watch Seinfeld, and then like, you can be on your merry way. So I don't know. He just seemed more like a brother or a friend. So we were walking to our cars and I bit it on the ice, just like slipped, fell down, cracked my knee. Like I have a huge bump today. But we're walking and I go down and I just hear him go, where'd you go? And I was like,
Oh my God, that's hilarious. And then I think there was something you were talking about the other day about like a frog tattoo story or something.
Oh yeah.
Different
I
person?
have a really weird tattoo. It's on my arm. The top
That's
is a
awesome.
frog and the bottom is a man, and it says, I don't know you.
That's awesome.
I had a dream that I got that tattoo, and I had the dream 2 times. So I got the tattoo, but I showed it to a guy on another date and he was like, huh, that's interesting. And I was like, I don't like you
Yeah, that's not a
anymore.
good
Like,
response. I
If
think
you don't like this tattoo, you can see yourself.
well, not just that, but I think like if I'm on a date and a girl shows me any kind of tattoo, to me that's just like a giant like firework display in my brain of like the date is going well.
Yeah.
If I'm the guy on the date, I'm like, wow, she's showing me like her arm and like her tattoo, and she's like really proud of it, and like that means she feels like comfortable gauging me to make sure I'm still alive and or have a sense of humor. Like
Yeah,
what
he wasn't impressed.
wow, his loss. What a tool.
Yeah. So
Um,
it's fine.
one time I I met a girl. This was back when I was living in Santa Monica, and we went like walking all over like the promenade and the pier and everything. And oh man, it was just one of those things like you think you know somebody just from like the dating profile or whatever, and there's all those similar interests and music and art and books and things like that. And then oh, I'm glad this only happened one time in my life that I know of. And at one point, like the sun was going down, and we were talking about like dinner, and then she's like, "Well, if this is going to turn into like an all-night situation, I'm going to need like 500 up front." And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, well, this is what I do for money." So I'm like, "Oh no." I'm like, "Really?" Because she seems so nice, and I'm like, "Wow, she's really into me." And then it's like dawned on me, and I'm like, "Oh, not only do I have to like say goodbye, I have to block you on like Facebook too now because I just added her like that day." And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I need to go now. And she's like, are you sure? I'm like, oh, I'm totally sure. It's kind of like you with the meth story. I'm like, this sounds like suspiciously like prostitution. So sayonara. Awkward.
Yeah, that's really bizarre.
And it was like she waited like 4 hours into whatever. And of course, by that time, I've already like bought her like a nice coffee, and we've already and like another snack, and we walked around and did a bunch of things and seen some sights. And like I said, walked to the ocean and everything. And then like it was one of those like maybe she thought like she shouldn't, and it's like at some point she had to, whatever. And then I'm like, oh, this is awkward. Like, yeah, like in my brain, I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Because it's like, and then when I walked away from her, it was that creepy feeling of like, there had to be some guy like not far away, like the pimp or whatever, or whoever was in charge of whatever she was doing. Like, what if I would have agreed to a dinner and whatever and then didn't have the money? I mean, that could have been like horrible. Like, oh, get out
Right?
of here. Yeah, so there's just one of those things where it's like sometimes you just have no idea. Like people just like you were saying, they seem so nice and so normal on the surface.
And then they
And
offer you meth or tell you that they're a prostitute.
yeah, it's like lurking underneath. It's a TV movie of the week, I guess. But I remember one time I went out with a girl, and um there was like this creepy guy, and he was staring at us from a nearby table. And then after like 15-20 minutes of our dinner, I was like, yeah, you see, I mean, I don't want to like stare, but there's that guy like over there in the corner, and he's been like eyeing us like a hawk the whole time. And she's like, oh yeah, that's my brother Jimmy. I'm like, what? Oh, he comes on all my dates. Does he? Why? And she's like, oh, it's none of your business. I'm like, it kind of is. That's really fucking creepy. Like, is he gonna like go into the movie theater with us and sit behind us? And she's like, oh yeah, like he already bought a ticket. I'm like, is he gonna like go on the walk with us later we talked about? And she was just like, yeah, but he usually, and this is like her phrasing, oh, he usually just lurks behind a tree. I'm like, yeah, I can't.
That's so weird.
You said lurks behind a tree. I'm like,
Usually just lurks. That's
this is
fine.
just how horror movies start. Like, well, that's just my brother Jimmy. He's only wanted in 4 states.
He usually just lurks.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, look at the time. You're not wearing a watch. Yep. Time to get a watch. Hey. You have any other crazy stuff that's happened?
I mean, I'm sure I have, but not anything like that. My very first
you
time I
ask
ever,
yourself too. You're like, is it me? Do I invite this, or am I just?
oh, I know for a fact that I like am a magnet for weird people. The very first time I ever went on a Tinder date, I thought things were going well, and then we met at a local brewery. We had like a drink or two, and then he was like, "So, do you want to come home and see my sex dungeon?" It's like, absolutely not.
You're
Like,
like,
no, I've known you for an hour and a half. I don't want to see your sex
you were like, you read those signs wrong, and there were no signs. There were no signs on that empty highway.
But like things like that happen to me even when I'm not on a date. Like I was at the library the other day and this guy just called out at me and my friend, "Hey, you!" And then he asked us who the lead singer of 10,000 Maniacs was. And I was like,
He was like,
"It's Natalie Merchant." And he was like, "You two look like Jay and Silent Bob." And I was like, "Okay, thank
you're
you."
like, dude, not a compliment.
Right? I was like, "Am I Jay because of the hair or am I Silent Bob?" And I was like,
He's like, whatever works. What a
and I was
jackass.
like, also, we're both women. I don't know.
He's like basically telling you like he's writing the fantasy as he's talking to you in his head.
Yeah. And he was there with what seemed to be his wife. So it was very strange.
And she's just probably long suffering and rolling her eyes.
Yes.
I mean, I've been to places too where it's just like random shit happens. But it's also the basis for writing, like people watching or just random things that happen to you. I remember being at like a Target, which I just refer to as the errands store. Like I always like every time I see a Target, I'm always like, do I need to do something? Do I need to get something? Did I not do something? Is that happening? So I was at a Target a couple weeks ago, and this guy came up to me, and I wasn't even wearing like the color red, like a polo or khaki pants. He comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, so like, would this work well, like in my kitchen, if like I wanted to like replace like the marble countertop?" And I'm like, "Me? What? I don't work here, man." He goes, "Yeah, but you're like a dude and you would know." And I'm like, I'm a dude, but I don't. What? Do I just have that face? Like sometimes people just tell you, "Oh, you just have that face of like a guy who knows."
Yeah. Well, you do look like a guy who knows.
I guess, but it's just like there's no. But the thing is, he wasn't carrying like any kitchen fixtures. There were no countertops. That's like more of a Home Depot kind of question. I'm in Target, like standing there, like holding like a pre-made salad and like some notebook paper and some other stuff for my kid, and I'm just like, me? Like, what? Is there just no other person around? So has that happened to you or someone, I mean, besides the Natalie Merchant story?
I mean, it happens to me so often that I can't
You're just on
even,
the street and you're like, shit.
right? Like one time, this is a really bizarre story. One time I was walking out of a yoga studio and I'm all like fucking sweaty and I look gross because I'm coming out of hot yoga. And this guy is standing there with a cigarette in his hand and he says, "You look beautiful." And then he ate the cigarette. He put the cigarette in his mouth and ate it. And I was like, well, now I don't trust your expert opinion. I probably
You
don't
were
look
like,
beautiful.
you just want that stamp with like the red ink and put it on his forehead and it just says dirt bag.
I was like, but why did you eat the cigarette?
He's like, I had to make it weird. Was that in
I don't
Indiana
even
when
think
that
I said
happened?
anything back to him. I was like, thank you. And I got in my car and drove away.
Was that in Indiana where it happened?
That was in Minneapolis.
I thought he was gonna eat the cigarette and be like, "Welcome to Minneapolis."
That would have been awesome.
Oh, so to parlay that into open mics, have you ever been heckled at an open mic or a reading?
Thankfully, I have not been.
I've been, but most of the time it's like I'm in a new place, or well, we haven't read anywhere for a while, but or it was like out of the city, where I didn't know anybody. Um, so I think one time I was reading somewhere and there were like these drunk women, like which is always good. It's like open mics are either competing with drunks if it's like a bar restaurant type setting, or if it's in a coffee shop with the grinder, like you're doing
Yeah.
some like heart-wrenching thing and you're just like, and then I looked at her as she reached into my rib cage and ferociously ripped at my
And
sickening heart. What? And you're like, oh wait. And then you read it again, and then you look over at the guy and he's like, he's gotta hit the blender again or whatever.
that, or there's like people trying to study and they're like side eyeing you, like, how dare you be reading poetry in here? I'm trying to do my statistics homework.
Oh, I've been places where like you look up from your page and there's just a dude like giving like an invisible blowjob to his hand. And you're like, really? And then I'm like, and then you stop and I'm like, what? Then he's just like, oh, there's just always going to be like that teenager or that like college kid that's just like, fuck you, man. Or
When I was on my poetry tour, I had a reading scheduled for Cleveland, Ohio at a coffee shop, and I showed up and there was nobody there. There was like two people, and I was like, what's going on? Like, you said like all these people were coming, and they were like, oh my God, it's today. They advertised it for the wrong day. So my sister was there and one of her friends, and then one of my other friends who lives in Cleveland. And I just like sat down and read them like two poems, and then we went to a bar.
well, I've also gotten like weird comments at readings because I write all different kinds of things, and so about 12 years ago I put out a book, and it even says in the description of Comedic Monologues.
Okay.
And so at the launch at a bookstore, I had some friends who were actors, and then they would come in and read and perform the pieces almost like characters, monologues, and dress up and have props. And that was kind of fun. And then I would read a few. But at a certain point, you have to read the stuff yourself. And then I got invited to feature at a reading. And then, I thought it went well, and it's getting some laughs. It's funny how you remember the bad stuff, right? And I remember this little old lady came to me like afterwards when I was like, signing and handing out copies and stuff. And she was just like, your poems were so long. And there's no reason that you have to read in these ridiculous voices. So horrible. I can't get that time back now.
Oh
And she
my
had her
God.
walker and she walked away. And the people behind them were just like, sorry. And I'm like, does she know? And I think it's just because so many times when there's a book launch and people can actually read in person, 90% of the time it's poetry because poems are short and you can rattle off like 10 or 15 poems in a 20-minute featured set.
Yeah.
Or, short stories, you're going to read the flash fiction stuff. Or, if someone's reading from a novel, it's an excerpt, it's like a paragraph or two. And then maybe go into another chapter and like, here's something about this character. But when people don't get what they want or what they're expecting, they get so pissy. Like women
People
especially, I don't know what it is, they get so catty. Like I've seen women do a great job featured at a reading, and then either the host doesn't like them or somebody else after the show is like, just make up a name like, good job, Lisa, way to like finish your set in a timely fashion. And it's just like, why? Like guys don't do that. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
certain guys do, but for the most part they're like, oh hey, good job, man, I like the one about this or this one line or something, and they'll pick something out. But what is that? If you've been to enough readings over time, why is it certain women just the claws come out? Do you know? I mean, is it just a
I
theory?
don't know. I tried just to
You've seen it though.
see that kind of shit happening. I'm just like,
I know, but like sometimes like the friend or the human adjacent will just rope you in and you're like, hey guys.
no, I have a black belt in avoiding confrontation.
Oh,
So
nice. You're just like, is there a back door to this place?
yeah, oh, I have to go.
She's gonna just moonwalk her way out to the parking lot, folks.
Exactly. That's what I do.
That's awesome. So, tell me a little bit about what you might be working on now and kind of what's in store for you in 2022.
Yeah, so right now I'm working on a manuscript. It's out at one place, though. I'm toying with the idea of letting my friend publish it. He has a small press in Minneapolis, well, in Minnesota. He lives in Alexandria now. So I just sent that his way. Um, I don't know the real title of it yet. I'm knocking around two titles. One of them is A Short History of Love. The other title is The Lady's Guide to Interstellar Travel.
I like the second one better. I mean, just
Yeah.
between the two, if you come up with a third one, but that one's my favorite of the two.
So that's what I'm working on currently. And then obviously I'm also hoping just to get some more poems written this year.
Well, I mean, you have a few left over from last year, it sounds like.
Yeah. So
Has there been anything that you've wanted to try in the arts that you haven't got to, or that when you were faced with yourself during a lockdown, you didn't get around to?
I made a couple zines when I was in lockdown, and I'm like, that was fun. Why don't I do that more? But it's because now I don't have as
Time,
much time on my
right?
hands.
Time is
But I
everything.
would also really like to try my hand at writing a lyric essay.
Okay.
Because I like to read them, but I've never tried to write one. But I don't know what it would be about if I did. So
Cool. What about other forms like short stories, everyone's great American novel, screenplays,
I've
movies?
I've written a novel and it was terrible, but I was also like
Really
19
young,
when I
probably,
wrote it.
right? Yeah.
I was 19.
So you haven't
Uh,
lived enough life and met enough interesting men on dates. That's the name of a book
true.
you could write. Interesting dates.
I also just don't have the attention span for that anymore. I am convinced that I have like ADD or ADHD, and like poetry is something that I can sit down and write a poem in 15 minutes and then I can move on to the next thing.
Well, that and it's like our favorite shows and movies on streaming now, people can just binge. And I try not to, but every once in a while, it's just like, well, I don't really want to watch Cobra Kai. Oh my God, I've watched all 10 episodes. What did I do with my weekend? Fuck. Okay. I should probably put on some clothes and go get some food.
Yeah,
It's a wormhole,
happens to
right? Like
me.
any show, like whatever you're into, it's like Wheel of Time or The Witcher or
Or I'll be like,
Stranger Things.
oh, I don't have 2 hours to watch a movie, and then I will watch 8 episodes of Monk. And I'm
Just
like,
like,
what the
and the
fuck
next
did
thing you
I
know,
just
you're
do?
like, your legs have atrophied or something. And you're like, oh, I haven't bent my legs in 4 hours. And the cat's just like, feed me.
Yeah. But I haven't
Um,
watched any Netflix since I moved in here. I'm thinking about just not getting a TV.
that's probably the smartest thing. Like I have a daughter and I think she would revolt and burn the place down if she didn't have access to like YouTube and, Disney Plus and her shows. And there's some stuff I like too, but I think I could live without it. I think I would just be like, I remember having a library card and people did things before streaming,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's tough when you have a kid, but um so it sounds like you have big plans for your writing. It also sounds like you plan on exploring your town a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's good. So um I guess just if you were going to offer advice to the youngsters, the kids who are all into their shenanigans, about getting involved with, maybe submitting their work and some do's and don'ts and some pitfalls that you went through. Like I would recommend going through submittable.com. I would recommend Duotrope. Submittable.com is kind of like the best like vestibule for like reaching out and finding like who's accepting things. And there's the feature on there too that you can find things that are not fee based.
Yeah, I like Submittable. I use it to submit my work. I like it when places use that as a submission tool. I hate the submission manager. I think that's just a big ugly machine. But I also use Duotrope. And I think that getting a Duotrope submission is worth the $5 if submitting your work is something that you feel like is going to be a long-lasting thing for you, because you can track your own statistics. You can look at, this was the thing that got me into like submitting and getting accepted, was Duotrope, because I would look on there and find magazines that had like, of course I'm going to submit to places that like the New Yorker and places where I'm like my yeah right list. But there was also like, when I was first submitting, I would find places where, okay, I might be able to get in here. They accept 15 to 20% of people who submit, which was kind of where I was at when I was first starting. Like those were the kinds of magazines that I was aiming for. And then after I got into those that had like a higher submission rate or like acceptance rate, then I would kind of like tier down into the ones that have lower acceptance rates. So I have found Duotrope really helpful for that.
Yeah, I think that's a good one too. And also you can just Google, you know, literary journals or magazines accepting submissions. I always try to tell people, I don't know if this is really sound advice, but for the first year that you're submitting, I mean, like you were talking about the pie in the sky, big name places, but the places that only have a submission window for like a couple of weeks, I try to say stay away from those for like the first year you're submitting, because you have to really know those magazines well and know what those themes are. Like one I've submitted to, but I try to stay away unless I know I have something for them. Like for example, like the Paris Review, where it's like, we have a 2-week window and submit now because we won't be taking submissions once we meet our quota. And then 2 days later, they've met their quota.
Yeah.
So it's like, unless you have something like that, you look in their guideline for that issue, for that theme that you have ready. Like if you just try to force yourself to fit something in like a cookie cutter shape for that, and then it's like, you're not going to have another 4 other pieces ready.
Exactly.
So that's why I say like a year later when they have, or 6 months later, whenever they open their submissions again, you probably will have 3 to 4 to 5 pieces that might fit that. So I always just hear people say like, well, you know, I wanted to submit to this or the Atlantic, but they're only taking this or this or this. I'm like, well, you know, don't keep submitting, and you know they're going to reject you if you don't have something for their
Yeah.
theme yet. And you
My
can't.
other
Go
big
ahead.
piece of advice though is just to like, the year that I got the most stuff published, when I was like a fledgling little fawn deer like poet on my new little legs, my goal was to get 100 rejections. So I had no goals about getting this many poems accepted for publication. I was just like, I'm going to send out as much as I can, read as many magazines as I can, find out what I like, send to those places. And that year I got like 30 acceptances.
Wow.
But I also got 127 rejections.
Well, yeah, it is a lot about persistence. It's about
Yeah.
dedicating the time. Like you're gonna have to get up half an hour early, or set aside an hour on one of your weekend days and be like, okay, like every other Saturday or Sunday morning, I'm gonna be here and submit to like at least 5 different magazines.
Exactly.
And just be thinking about putting like groups of 3 or 5 things together just to have them ready to go. That way you're
Yeah.
not that way you're not up at 4 in the morning like, do these fit the theme?
But that year I also found a ton of magazines just like clicking around that I still read to this day and submit to and love everything that they publish.
So awesome. And there's always going to be new stuff. There's always going to be online journals. There's always going to be anthologies are good ways to get
Yeah.
discovered, because usually those publishers also publish individual poetry collections too. So, all right, well, we've been gabbing here for about an hour, so I want to give you a little bit of time to kind of plug the names of your books and also like your website, your blog, and wherever else people can find your work online.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure my books are all out of print, but my first chapbook is called Ether Or. Maybe you can find some weird copy of it on eBay for $100. I don't know. My second book is called Oh No Everything. My third chapbook is called Over the Moon. And then maybe my full-length book will be called The Lady's Guide to Interstellar Travel. You can find my work online at brettelizabethjenkins.com. You can follow me on Instagram at cursive writing. And my Twitter handle is fartmaster5000.
Which is so awesome. So before we go, I wanted to see if you had a couple of poems maybe nearby, if you wanted to.
I do.
I mean, I didn't want to put you on the spot, but if you have them, you can read
I
them.
picked out a couple to read just in case we had time for that.
Yeah, I was like, I really wanted to hear what they sound like read aloud. So
I wrote this one last month. It's called This Poem Takes Place in a Bar in Minnesota. The boys in the swivel chairs are drinking Fireball like they're about to stop selling it, and I hope they do. Big Mike looks like he's about to fall asleep in his cup. The guys in the Minnesota Vikings shirts are 7 drinks deep and have just started yelling, "Fuck Wisconsin," but nobody joins in. Amanda's trying to make enough tips to cover both her rent and her coke habit. Somebody keeps playing yakety sax on the jukebox and everyone's pissed. It's me. Barb is coming in to set up the bingo balls. Sadly, an unsuspecting family has come in with their 2nd grade boy hoping for a good meal on a Saturday afternoon. Channing tells me he'll pay me all of the money in his wallet to draw a dick on the wall in the women's bathroom, so I do. All of the money Channing has in his wallet is $6. The domesticated squirrel everyone calls Gordon is outside begging for nuts. It's only 6 o'clock and Amy's threatening to call the police. Yakety sax blares over the sound system while Jim makes out with a girl in the ripped jeans. Jello shots are only $1, but they don't have any red ones. Emily goes with an old man to smoke weed behind the dumpsters. Karaoke starts soon, and Rhodey tells me he doesn't want to hear that shit. The country dancers come in and out of the ballroom, sweaty in their cowboy hats. It's 9 p.m. now. I would die for anyone here.
wow, I dig it.
That's written about my favorite bar in Minneapolis, the Eagles Club, which I miss dearly.
I think you'll find a dive that's going to be local that you'll fit right into.
I think so.
All right, what else you got?
Okay, this poem is called My Mother Prays for Me in 1986, and it goes horribly awry. In the year of my birth, my mother went to mass and prayed for me, that I would never go hungry, that I would always be healthy, that I would not end up a rodeo clown. She asked around, and on average, 49.5 rodeo clowns are trampled every year by bulls. And besides, they have terrible benefits. Instead, I ended up a sad poet. What did she expect? I fritter away my meager earnings on beer and nail polishes with names like Unicorn Puke and Shake Your Moneymaker. I have had strange jobs. I worked in a factory that made aluminum cans. One summer, I sold fish to rich snobs. I don't believe in God, but maybe he answered my mother's prayer. I can imagine my life as a rodeo clown, married to a stout matador, living in our RV and traveling from city to city, performing for drunk honky-tonk dads and truck driving chain smokers. It's not a glamorous life, but people laugh when I pull down my pants to show my bloomers. And my husband has only been gored twice.
I like the fact that you can reference Puking Unicorn and a Black Crowes album all in the same poem,
Yes, it's
among other things. But yeah, those two stood out to me. I'm like, I think they were in the same line. That's really impressive.
it's a
All right,
skill that I have.
we've got time for one more. So if you've got one, feel free to fire away.
Yeah, I have one more poem. It's not that funny though.
It's okay. Just as long as it's not what we were talking about before, like bloody dead animal lying on the floor, and you're like obscene.
No, this is called I Have Something to Tell the Body. My beloved little body, intractable machine, you small living clock. I have something to tell you, but I don't know what it is. If there is a God, I ask that he look the other way while I fill you with carbohydrates and something called maltodextrin, while I soak you in the giant puddles of the earth. Yes, bag of blood, we are the body in this poem. We're not separate. I don't understand the science, but somehow the I and the you are mixed up, cocktailed together, little breakable system. One day I figure you will have had enough and give up. But which one of us will be to blame, pale container? How surprised we should all be that we keep the same body our whole life. The things that happen to it like icons on a map. Where do my country summer days live? My middle school love for murder books. What happened to the place in my breastbone where I loved violently a tall man in a raincoat? God, if you're there, put me in a boat and make me feel small and hungry. One drop of water in a galactic rain cloud.
Nice. I'm impressed. This is really good stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to welcome you for being on the show. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Yeah, like I said, it's just totally laid back conversation. Nobody's like pulling out a microphone with like hard hitting current affair questions or something.
Tell me your views on Palestine.
Yes. Tell us what you think about the Industrial Revolution. Don't be brief. Yeah. But feel free to tell all your friends. We're definitely looking for more, artists, painters, actors,
I
writers.
will. I'm going to put you in touch with my upstairs neighbor who is a poet who just came out with a book.
Nice. Yeah, send it to him. The link when it comes out, or you can direct them to the YouTube page. We need subscribers desperately. We just started last year. So thank you again for being on the show. Brett, you're awesome. And I look forward to big things from you this year.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Eric.
No problem. You have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.
Bye now.
Bye.